Beloved, there is a place in God where healing does not take months, years, or long seasons. There is a place where the very atmosphere of His presence becomes medicine to your bones, restoration to your mind, and renewal to your spirit. That place is described in Psalm 91, the secret place of the Most High. When you step into that place through prayer, something supernatural begins to move. Not by your effort, not by your strength, but by His covenant faithfulness. Psalm 91 is not merely poetry. It is a spiritual law. He who dwells in the secret place means the one who intentionally stays connected to God. When you pray Psalm 91 before your head touches the pillow, you are not reciting words. You are activating protection, healing, and divine peace over your entire night. The moment you speak, heaven hears, and what heaven hears, heaven answers. Nighttime is not simply a period of sleep. In the realm of the Spirit, night is a moment of divine surgery. Your body relaxes, your heart quiets, and your spirit becomes more sensitive to God's touch. When you pray Psalm 91, you invite the presence of the Almighty to overshadow you. His shadow is not just comfort, it is healing. It is deliverance. It is restoration. Many don't realize that healing often happens when the body is resting, because God designed rest as a doorway for refreshing and renewal. As you declare, He is my refuge and my fortress, something shifts inside you. Fear loses its grip. Anxiety begins to crumble. Disease can no longer dominate because you have stepped into faith's authority. Prayer aligns your spirit with the truth that God is your protector, your healer, and your defender. And when fear exits, healing enters. When faith rises, sickness falls. Psalm 91 reminds you that angels have been assigned to you. They watch over you, they stand guard. When you pray this psalm, you are not praying alone. Heaven's army accompanies your words. While you sleep, angels work. They push back darkness, they guard your room, they minister strength, healing, and supernatural peace. Your night becomes a sanctuary, not a battleground. So tonight, as you close your eyes, pray Psalm 91 with confidence. Speak it boldly, believe it deeply. Say, Lord, you are my refuge. I trust you with my body, my mind, my future. And as you do, expect Him to move. Expect healing to flow. Expect peace to settle. Expect restoration to begin. Because the God who watches over you does not sleep, and the moment you surrender your night to Him, He begins His work in you. My friend, healing is not far away. It is not beyond your reach. It is as close as your prayer, as near as your faith, and as powerful as your trust in the one who promised, "With long life will I satisfy you and show you my salvation." Tonight can be the night everything changes, because Psalm 91 is not just a prayer, it is a promise. And God always fulfills His promises. When a person turns to Psalm 91 with a heart full of expectation and a spirit ready to believe, something extraordinary begins to happen deep within, something far beyond what the natural mind can calculate or understand. For this scripture is not merely a collection of poetic lines, but a divine blueprint for healing, protection, and supernatural recovery that works quietly yet powerfully, especially in the stillness of the night when human strength fades and the soul becomes most open to the touch of God. As you pray these verses, you invite the reality of the Almighty's presence to surround you like an invisible shield, wrapping you in a covering of peace that pushes out fear, anxiety, and the emotional exhaustion that so often weakens the body. Healing is not always a physical process alone. Much of it begins in the unseen parts of your being, your thoughts, your emotions, your beliefs, because when fear is present, healing hesitates, and when faith rises, healing accelerates. Psalm 91 works like a spiritual vaccine against the pressures of life, against the storms that wear you down, and against the invisible attacks that strike the mind when you are most vulnerable. When you speak, "He is my refuge and my fortress," you are not hoping something will change. You are declaring a spiritual law that activates the protective power of God over your entire being. In the night, when your body rests and your mind quiets, God's presence often works most deeply, repairing what stress broke, restoring what fear drained, and renewing what fatigue damaged. Angels respond to your faith-infused words, moving into position around you as guardians, protectors, and ministers of healing, creating a spiritual environment where sickness loses its power and peace begins to multiply. Many people underestimate how closely healing is connected to rest, but rest is not simply sleep. Rest is a spiritual posture that says, "I trust you fully, and I release everything into your hands." And when the heart enters that posture, the body receives permission to heal faster. Psalm 91 becomes the bridge between your weakened human strength and God's unlimited divine power, allowing Him to work in ways you cannot see, but will surely feel by morning. As you pray this scripture before sleeping, your mind becomes aligned with truth instead of fear. Your emotions settle under God's peace instead of anxiety, and your body relaxes under His protection instead of carrying the weight of the day. The night hours, though silent, are filled with divine activity on your behalf, angels guarding your room, God's presence hovering over you, and His peace entering the deepest layers of your being, like a healing balm. When you awaken after praying Psalm 91 with genuine faith, you often rise lighter, stronger, and clearer, not because the night itself healed you, but because the God who does not sleep worked through the night to restore what life tried to break. This scripture does not promise freedom from challenges, but it guarantees protection through them, promising that no evil will overpower you and no disease will consume you, for the one who watches over you has committed himself to your safety, your healing, and your victory. When this prayer becomes a lifestyle rather than a one-time plea for help, healing becomes a natural outcome rather than a rare miracle, because a heart that dwells in God's presence consistently becomes a heart that receives His power continually. Night after night, as you declare Psalm 91 with unwavering faith, you strengthen the spiritual walls around your life, making you less vulnerable to fear, worry, sickness, or emotional collapse. Your confidence grows, your peace deepens, and your body responds to the calmness your spirit now carries. This is why many experience healing overnight, not because the verse is magic, but because faith activates what God promised. Prayer opens the door for Him to work. Rest allows the healing to settle. And His presence becomes the atmosphere in which your whole being can recover, renew, and rise again with strength you did not have the night before. When a person turns to Psalm 91 with a sincere heart and an open spirit, they step into a realm where divine protection and healing work silently yet powerfully, especially during the night when the body is at rest and the mind is free from the noise of daily life. This scripture is more than comfort. It is a spiritual law and a covenant promise that transforms the inner atmosphere of a person who believes. When you pray its words before sleeping, you are not simply reciting verses. You are activating the shield of the Almighty over your entire being, inviting God's presence to overshadow you and push out fear, anxiety, stress, and emotional heaviness that often blocks healing. Every sentence of Psalm 91 carries a truth that reprograms the mind toward faith and away from fear. And when the mind shifts, the body follows. As you say, "He is my refuge and my fortress," you speak life into your spirit, reminding yourself that you are not alone, not forgotten, and not unprotected. This creates a deep internal calm that allows your body to loosen the tension it carries and enter a state where healing can flow more freely. The night becomes a sacred space, a spiritual hospital where God begins repairing what was damaged through pressure, hurt, worry, or sickness. Angels take their positions around you, not because you ask them by name, but because God responds to faith-filled prayer by releasing heavenly protection over those who trust His word. You may not see these movements, but the effects become noticeable as peace settles into your chest. Your breathing becomes deeper, your thoughts become lighter, and your heart becomes steadier. Many times, healing is delayed not because God withholds it, but because the soul is too overwhelmed with fear and stress to receive it. Psalm 91 breaks that barrier and makes room for restoration to enter. Rest is not just physical relaxation. It is spiritual surrender, and true rest allows God to reach the places within you that medicine, therapy, or willpower cannot touch. When you go to sleep after praying this psalm, you enter the night covered, guarded, and positioned for supernatural recovery. As the night progresses and the world around you falls silent, your body begins to respond to the environment of faith you created through Psalm 91 prayer. The presence of God becomes like a soothing blanket over your spirit, calming the storms within and stabilizing the emotions that once felt uncontrollable. Many people underestimate how much internal turmoil slows down the healing process. But when fear exits, healing enters, and when anxiety stops shouting, the voice of God becomes clear. In that clarity, the body finds the peace it needs to repair itself at a deeper level. Healing often happens at night because the mind is no longer fighting, the body is no longer resisting, and the spirit is more open to receive divine touch. As you sleep, God works in the unseen, adjusting what was misaligned, restoring what was broken, and renewing what was drained. You awaken not because the night changed you on its own, but because God used the night to complete the work He began when you prayed in faith. Psalm 91 is not a magic formula. It is a doorway to divine intervention, a spiritual invitation for God to cover you, heal you, and strengthen you. And when this prayer becomes a consistent part of your life, your entire being begins to transform. Fear loses its influence, stress loses its power, sickness loses its grip. You rise in the morning lighter than you slept, with peace in your chest and strength in your bones, because the God who watches over you neither sleeps nor slumbers. Every night you pray Psalm 91, you reinforce your spiritual foundation, making your heart stronger, your mind clearer, and your body more receptive to the healing God longs to release. This is why many experience healing overnight, not because the Scripture works instantly like a technique, but because faith, rest, prayer, and God's presence come together in perfect harmony to bring a level of restoration that no earthly method can produce. When a person turns to Psalm 91 with a heart ready to believe and a spirit open to receive, they step into a realm where divine healing, protection, and peace begin to operate in ways the natural mind does not fully understand. This scripture is not just a collection of comforting lines. It is a spiritual covenant that reveals how God shelters, guards, and restores those who place their trust in Him. When these words are spoken with faith, a faith that expects God to move, an inner shift begins. Fear begins to loosen its grip. Anxiety starts to dissolve. And a sense of divine assurance settles over the heart. Praying Psalm 91 before sleep creates a heavenly atmosphere within the mind and soul, preparing the body to enter rest without the weight of worry. Rest is one of God's greatest healing tools, and by praying this scripture, you invite His presence into your resting hours. It is in that peaceful surrender that the body becomes more open to recovery, the mind becomes calmer, and the heart becomes more anchored in truth. As you declare that God is your refuge and fortress, you activate the spiritual reality of His covering, and you position yourself under a divine shadow where healing flows more freely. As the night unfolds, the prayer of Psalm 91 continues working even as you sleep. The body naturally repairs itself during the night, but when your spirit is aligned with God's promises, this repair becomes deeper, smoother, and more complete. In the quiet hours while the world rests, God often does His greatest work in the unseen parts of you. He quiets the fears that once stole your peace, dismantles the negative thoughts that drained your strength, and pushes out the emotional heaviness that made your spirit feel tired. The angels mentioned in Psalm 91 respond to the faith you expressed, guarding your room, surrounding your bed, and creating a spiritual barrier that blocks fear, nightmares, or mental unrest from entering your sleep. This divine covering allows your nervous system to calm, your breathing to deepen, and your body to shift into a state of true restoration. Healing is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it is silent, gentle, and gradual, but that quiet work often produces powerful results by morning. Psalm 91 allows you to sleep with confidence instead of fear, trust instead of worry, and peace instead of tension. This shift in your inner state is the doorway through which God releases renewal, strength, and healing throughout your entire being. By the time morning comes, the work that began in prayer and continued throughout the night becomes evident. Many people wake up feeling lighter, clearer, and stronger, not because the night itself has magical power, but because God honored their faith and worked through their rest. When Psalm 91 becomes a nightly practice rather than a desperate one-time prayer, the effect becomes even more profound. Your spiritual atmosphere changes, your emotional resilience increases, your physical health becomes more stable because stress no longer dominates your inner world. You begin to see that healing is not always a dramatic event. Sometimes it is the natural fruit of living under God's covering. Each night you pray these promises. You reinforce your trust and weaken the influence of fear. Over time, your entire being begins to align with the truth that God is your protector, your healer, and your constant refuge. You rise in the morning with renewed confidence, knowing that the God who covered you through the night is the same God who will guide you through the day. This is why so many experience overnight change, not because the scripture works like a technique, but because faith, prayer, surrender, rest, and divine presence work together in perfect harmony to bring healing that reaches deeper than any earthly method can. When a person turns to Psalm 91 with intention, sincerity, and expectation, they step into a spiritual environment where God's healing, protection, and peace begin to surround them in a deeply personal way. This passage is not merely ancient poetry. It is a living covenant that continues to work in the hearts of those who believe. When spoken aloud before sleep, its words shape the atmosphere of the mind, quiet the noise of the day, and lift the heavy emotional burdens that prevent true rest. The human body was designed to heal most effectively during peaceful sleep, and Psalm 91 prepares the heart to enter that state without fear or worry. As faith rises, fear weakens, and as fear weakens, the body begins to relax, allowing healing to reach deeper layers of the soul. The moment you declare that God is your refuge, you open a spiritual doorway that invites divine peace to settle within you, creating a sacred space where restoration can begin. As the night progresses, the impact of Psalm 91 continues to unfold even when you are no longer conscious. Science shows that the body repairs cells, restores strength, and recalibrates the nervous system during sleep. But when prayer prepares the mind beforehand, this process becomes more efficient and more peaceful. The promises of Psalm 91 work like a shield, blocking intrusive thoughts, calming emotional distress, and preventing spiritual unrest from disturbing your rest. The passage speaks of divine guardianship, reminding you that angels are assigned to those who trust in God. And this truth brings an inner assurance that allows your entire being to settle. In that settled state, your breathing becomes steadier, your heart rate softens, and your body shifts into deeper levels of rest. Healing, whether emotional, physical, or spiritual, often requires stillness, and the prayer of Psalm 91 creates that stillness by removing fear's grip on the mind and replacing it with a confidence that you are safe, covered, and protected through the night. As you sleep under this divine covering, invisible work takes place within you. The stress that once tightened your chest begins to loosen. The heaviness that clouded your thoughts begins to lift, and the exhaustion that weighed on your spirit begins to fade. Healing is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is a gentle process, a quiet renewal that happens from the inside out. In the silence of the night, God addresses the areas of your life that you cannot fix through effort alone. He strengthens your emotions where they were weak, restores your peace where it was broken, and stabilizes your thoughts where they were troubled. The night becomes not just a period of physical sleep, but a spiritual sanctuary where your internal world receives alignment, comfort, and restoration. This is why many people wake up feeling lighter, clearer, and stronger after praying Psalm 91. Not because the night magically heals, but because faith allows God to work without resistance. When morning comes, you rise with evidence of the unseen work that took place. You feel a renewed sense of calm, a clarity in your thoughts, and a strength in your spirit that was not there the night before. This transformation becomes even more powerful when Psalm 91 is prayed consistently, night after night, forming a rhythm of faith that strengthens your inner life. Your mind becomes more disciplined, your emotions more balanced, and your body more responsive to peace because you have learned to dwell in the place of divine protection. Healing becomes a natural result of this spiritual alignment. You begin to walk through your days with greater confidence, knowing that the same presence that covered you through the night continues to guide you through every challenge ahead. Over time, this nightly practice reshapes the way you think, sleep, heal, and live, reminding you that true restoration is not only possible, but continually available to those who choose to rest under the shadow of God's promise. When a person turns to Psalm 91 with a spirit ready to receive, they enter a place where the promises of God begin to take shape inside them and around them. This scripture does not simply comfort. It transforms the inner atmosphere of a person who believes. By declaring its words before sleep, you shift your focus from the pressures of life to the protection of God. This shift is powerful because the mind often carries stress into the night, and stress interrupts the healing process that the body is naturally designed to experience during rest. When you speak, "He is my refuge," you speak truth over your fears, and that truth begins calming the mind, stabilizing the heart, and preparing your soul to rest in peace rather than anxiety. This peaceful inner state becomes the foundation upon which healing can begin. As the night begins and you lie down after praying Psalm 91, something spiritual and psychological takes place simultaneously. The fear that once controlled your thoughts loses its influence, and your emotions begin to settle. Because the promises of God act like a spiritual anchor, your mind becomes less vulnerable to worry, nightmares, or mental tension. The words of Psalm 91 remind you that divine protection covers you, which helps the nervous system relax. When the nervous system relaxes, the body enters a deeper level of rest. And deep rest is where the body repairs cells, balances hormones, and releases physical tension. This partnership between faith and biology creates a perfect environment for healing to flow more freely throughout your being. As you sleep under the covering of these promises, the unseen work of healing continues in quiet but powerful ways. The mind that was overwhelmed finds new clarity. The emotions that felt weak gain new strength, and the physical body begins to restore what was damaged by stress and exhaustion. Healing, more often than not, happens silently. It does not require dramatic signs or intense feelings. It simply requires an environment where peace can replace pressure. Psalm 91 creates that environment. It removes the inner chaos that competes with healing and replaces it with divine stillness where the presence of God can work uninterrupted. This is why people who pray this scripture before bed often wake up feeling lighter, clearer, and stronger. By morning, the gentle work that took place during the night becomes visible in the way you feel. Your thoughts are calmer, your spirit is brighter, and your body feels more refreshed than it would have under the weight of fear and worry. This experience becomes even more powerful when the prayer of Psalm 91 becomes a daily routine. With each passing night, your mind becomes more trained to trust, your emotions become more resilient, and your heart becomes more aligned with God's promises. Stress loses its grip because faith has taken its place. You begin to notice that the peace you felt at night begins to follow you into your day, guiding your decisions, supporting your confidence, and strengthening your reactions to challenges. Over time, this consistent practice shapes your entire lifestyle. You no longer enter sleep with fear, and you no longer wake up with emotional heaviness. Psalm 91 becomes like spiritual armor that you wear day and night, giving you the confidence that you are never alone and never without protection. Healing becomes a steady process, not just a one-time experience, because your heart continually remains in a place of trust. You start to walk through life with a deeper sense of calm, knowing that the same God who covered you through the night continues to guide, heal, and protect you throughout the day. This is the quiet but powerful transformation that happens when faith, rest, prayer, and God's presence work together to renew your entire being from the inside out. When a person turns to Psalm 91 with sincerity and expectation, they step into a place where divine promises begin to work within the heart. This passage is more than comforting words. It is a spiritual shield that surrounds the mind and soul with peace and courage. When prayed before sleep, it interrupts the cycle of fear and restlessness that many people carry into the night. Fear makes the mind restless, but faith settles it. By declaring that God is your refuge, you send a strong message to your inner world. You are not alone, you are not unprotected, and you are not fighting life on your own strength. This assurance becomes the first step toward healing, because the body responds positively when the mind is at peace. As the night begins to unfold, the words of Psalm 91 continue to work silently within you. Stressful thoughts usually rise when everything gets quiet, but the promises in this scripture push those thoughts aside and replace them with calm confidence. Your emotions begin to settle because your heart is anchored in something greater than fear. The body naturally seeks rest, but it cannot enter deep healing rest when the mind is tense. Psalm 91 helps break that tension. It reminds you that divine protection surrounds you, which helps your nervous system shift into a state where rest becomes easier and more peaceful. This shift is essential because healing requires both physical stillness and emotional calm. As you enter deeper sleep, the spiritual effect of the prayer continues to guide your inner world. Healing does not always appear in dramatic ways. Often it happens quietly during the moments when the body is most relaxed and the spirit is most open. Your thoughts begin to reorganize, releasing the worries you carried throughout the day. The emotional burden you could not shake begins to loosen its grip, making room for fresh peace to take its place. The body also takes advantage of this calm environment, repairing cells, balancing chemical processes, and restoring energy that stress had drained away. This harmony between faith and biology creates a powerful pathway for healing. During the night, the promises in Psalm 91 act like a shield around you. Even though you are unaware of it while sleeping, the spiritual confidence you built through prayer protects your mind from fear, driven dreams, and unnecessary stress. You are covered with a sense of safety that allows your heart to rest soundly. This safety is not imagined. It is the result of releasing your worries into God's care and trusting that He watches over you. When the heart is confident, the body rests deeper. When the body rests deeper, healing becomes more complete. The night becomes a time of quiet restoration rather than fear or tension. By the time morning arrives, the invisible work that happened during your sleep becomes visible in how you feel. You wake up lighter, because the burden you carried yesterday no longer sits heavily on your chest. You wake up clearer, because your thoughts have settled and your emotions have aligned with peace. You wake up stronger, because your body received the kind of rest it could not experience under stress. This is the power of entering the night with Scripture on your heart. Psalm 91 prepared your inner world to receive healing rather than resist it. What happened inside you during those hours was not accidental. It was the natural result of placing your trust in divine protection. When this becomes a consistent practice, the transformation becomes even stronger. Each night builds on the last, creating a habit of peace, a lifestyle of trust, and a rhythm of rest that supports healing on every level. Your mind becomes more stable, your emotions more resilient, and your body more responsive to restoration. Fear no longer dominates your nights, and worry no longer controls your mornings. You begin to live with the confidence that the same presence that covered you while you slept continues to guide you throughout your day. Healing becomes steady, peace becomes normal, and your life becomes a testimony of what happens when faith, rest, prayer, and divine care work together to renew your entire being. When a person turns to Psalm 91 with a heart open to receive, they step into a spiritual place where God's promises become more than words. They become a shield, a covering, and a source of deep inner strength. This passage creates an atmosphere of faith that calms the mind and prepares the heart to rest. Many people carry fear, stress, and emotional heaviness into the night, and these things weaken the body's natural ability to heal. But when Psalm 91 is spoken with sincerity, it interrupts those negative patterns and replaces them with peace. This shift is the beginning of healing, because a peaceful heart allows the body to relax in ways that fear cannot permit. As the night begins, the mind naturally tries to replay worries and unresolved thoughts from the day. But the words of Psalm 91 act like a spiritual filter that pushes away fearful thoughts and brings clarity to the heart. When you declare that God is your refuge, you remind yourself that you are not facing life's challenges alone. This creates a stabilizing effect on the emotions, helping them settle instead of rising into panic or restlessness. The emotions and the nervous system are closely connected, and when the emotions calm, the the nervous system follows. This internal calm is essential because healing requires both mental and physical stillness. As sleep begins to deepen, the spiritual influence of the prayer continues its work quietly but powerfully. Healing often takes place when the mind is no longer fighting, when the emotions are no longer overwhelmed, and when the body is no longer tense. Psalm 91 helps establish this harmonious environment. The body begins to repair cells, restore strength, and rebalance processes that stress has disrupted. The mind releases old fears, and the heart becomes lighter. The spiritual effect of believing these promises works together with the natural healing design of the body, creating a deeper level of restoration. Throughout the night, the protective promises of Psalm 91 act like a shield. Even though you are asleep, the faith you activated before resting continues to guard your mind and emotions. Nighttime is often when people feel most vulnerable, but this scripture reminds you that you are covered by divine protection. This sense of spiritual security helps prevent nightmares, anxiety spikes, or restless sleep patterns. Your heart rests easier when it knows it is safe, and this deep rest allows the body to enter healing stages that are not possible under fear or stress. By morning, the effects of this inner work become visible. You wake up feeling clearer because your thoughts are no longer burdened with yesterday's fears. You wake up feeling lighter because the emotional pressure has softened. You wake up feeling stronger because the body received uninterrupted rest. These changes demonstrate the powerful connection between spiritual peace and physical healing. When the inner world is calm, the physical body responds positively. Psalm 91 creates the foundation for this calmness, allowing your whole being to receive the renewal that sleep was meant to provide. As this practice becomes consistent, the transformation becomes even more noticeable. Each night that you pray Psalm 91 builds a stronger foundation of faith within you. Over time, fear has less influence because your mind has learned to trust instead of panic. Your emotions become more stable because they have become anchored in peace rather than uncertainty. Your body becomes more responsive to rest because it no longer enters the night carrying emotional tension. This consistency turns healing from a moment into a lifestyle, creating long-term strength. In the long run, Psalm 91 becomes more than a prayer. It becomes a nightly pathway to renewal. You no longer enter sleep stressed, and you no longer wake up drained. Instead, you move through your nights with peace and through your days with confidence. The same presence that covered you while you slept continues to guide you as you face new challenges. Healing becomes steady, peace becomes familiar, and your life becomes a living example of how faith, rest, trust, and divine protection work together to restore the entire being, mind, body, and spirit.